Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really tense, real-world aviation moment to see how just the tiniest oversights can snowball into major risks. Look, if you have ever felt the crushing pressure of a high-stakes environment, the cockpit of a commercial airliner departing New York's LaGuardia Airport is pretty much as intense as it gets. We are going to break down a specific incident involving Southwest Flight 3163. It's a genuinely fascinating case study, not just in aviation procedure, but in human psychology, situational awareness, and how highly trained experts react when things suddenly go totally off script. Imagine you're the pilot. You've just taken off, you think you're perfectly on course, doing exactly what the manual tells you to do, and then, bam, the radio crackles with a jarring, high-pitched demand to turn right immediately. We drop right into the action with this intense scolding from LaGuardia Air Traffic Control, and it puts us directly into the stress of that cockpit. It's the exact kind of sudden, loud correction that can just make your stomach completely drop.
So, what actually happened here? The real question we need to answer is how a standard, everyday takeoff turned into such a dangerous deviation. I mean, no one gets into a commercial cockpit unprepared, right? Especially not in a high-density traffic area like the New York metropolitan airspace. So how did a crew that successfully passed every single hurdle to become airline pilots find themselves on the wrong heading, flying straight into an intense reprimand from air traffic control?
Well, to figure out the mistake, we actually have to rewind a bit. We need to look at the invisible layers of procedure that are supposed to keep flights safe long before the engines even start spooling up. You see, aviation is completely built on the idea that humans make mistakes. It's inevitable. So the system requires these rigorous pre-flight rituals, with multiple layers of verification specifically designed to trap errors before that plane ever takes to the sky. Pilots use this incredibly strict three-point checklist to verify their departure route. The goal is to ensure that their computer, their printed paper, and their iPad all match up perfectly. First, they request their pre-departure clearance via the computer. Then they print out a physical piece of paper. Finally, whoever is flying that leg takes that paper, looks at the expected clearance on their iPad, and goes line by line to verify what's actually loaded into the aircraft's computer. Both pilots have to verify this. It's meticulous. They compare all three things, and only if they all line up perfectly are you good to go. Now, on this particular day, Southwest 3163 and the plane that took off right before them, American 2897, were both assigned this exact departure clearance, the LaGuardia 7 departure. In fact, literally everybody taking off from runway 31 at LaGuardia on this day was given this exact same departure. It is the absolute baseline expectation. But, as we're about to see, the baseline expectation and the actual clearance loaded into the computer can sometimes be two very different things. And here is where things go off the rails. It's the exact moment where textbook expectations violently clash with the sheer reality of navigating New York's super crowded airspace. The standard printed version of the LaGuardia 7 departure, the one sitting right there in the manual, tells pilots to do one thing, but the specific pre-departure clearance, which are the customized instructions handed down for that specific flight, might tell them something else entirely. If a crew gets distracted and cuts even a slight corner on that pre-flight ritual, they are probably going to miss those updated instructions. This brings us to the crux of the whole mix-up. The manual explicitly says fly a 314-degree runway heading, but air traffic control? They actually expect an immediate right turn to a 355-degree heading. Why? To avoid the intense Teterboro and Newark traffic sitting directly across the Hudson River. The Southwest pilots were looking at the printed page that said fly 314 up to 5,000 feet. But their specific clearance from air traffic control almost certainly amended that to an immediate 355-degree right turn. Somehow, during their triple-check briefing, both pilots completely missed this critical change. So they take off, and the Southwest pilot gets on the radio, sounding completely confident, and announces they're flying the printed 314-degree heading. The tower had even just commended them for getting off the runway quickly, so the crew is feeling great. They switch over to departure control and announce exactly what they are doing. 314 on the heading. They have literally no idea they're making a critical error right then and there. But for the departure controller, this is the exact moment they realize a massive conflict is unfolding in the sky. And that's when ATC jumps in with a pretty stern, educational scolding. The controller instructs them to turn right immediately, and then delivers this little tutorial. Just to let you know, you will never get runway heading off of 31 at LaGuardia because of Teterboro and Newark traffic directly in front of you. See, if you fly in and out of LaGuardia all the time, you memorize this stuff. It's an unwritten rule you just know by heart. But if you aren't a local, you have to rely completely on your clearance, the exact clearance that this crew somehow missed.
What's really fascinating here is the plane that took off right before them, American 2897. They executed this departure absolutely flawlessly because they actually caught the 355-degree turn in their pre-departure checks. They were on the exact same runway, given the exact same LaGuardia 7 departure, and they didn't get scolded. Why? Because they checked their boxes, trapped the change during their pre-flight briefing, and threaded the needle perfectly with that immediate right turn.
So let's talk about the human element here, because this is where it gets incredibly relatable. When that controller's high-pitched, intense voice came over the radio barking at Southwest to turn right immediately, a very specific psychological phenomenon happened to the pilot flying that plane.
Under the sudden stress of being yelled at by ATC, the flustered Southwest pilot just stumbles and completely forgets his own call sign. He gets the command to correct his heading, he tries to comply and read back the instruction, but all that comes out on the radio is, He knows he's done something wrong. He's just been sharply corrected, and his brain simply freezes up.
Look, we can all empathize with this, right? It's a totally universal human reaction. When you suddenly realize you've made a high-stakes mistake, that fight-or-flight adrenaline hits hard, and your brain just literally dumps its working memory. The very first rule of aviation is to fly the airplane, and to comply with the clearance you've just been given. But under that kind of pressure, all the basic, obvious information, like who you are and what your flight number is, just vanishes from your immediate recall.
And this brain dump, it creates a dangerous cascading effect. The pilot is still struggling with his call sign here, still so flustered by the unexpected reprimand. Because his working memory is totally overloaded by the stress, he actually drops the 1 in 15,000 and mistakenly reads back an altitude of 5,000 feet instead. That is an entirely wrong and potentially dangerous altitude constraint.
Now, New York air traffic controllers definitely have a reputation for being, let's say, a bit sharp-tongued or intense at times. But despite that attitude, they are undeniably large, in charge, and top tier. They immediately catch this altitude error. Operating one of the most complex, high-density traffic areas in the entire world, they caught the initial heading error instantly, and they caught this altitude readback error instantly. They really prove exactly why they are the best of the best.
Okay, so how do you avoid this kind of mental lockup? Let's break down some actionable takeaways from aviation expert Captain Steve on managing this kind of intense, split-second situational pressure. Captain Steve points out that while the Southwest crew eventually got things straightened out and nobody was hurt, it was a major nail-biter. But there are very specific physical habits you can build to prevent this exact type of freeze-up from happening to you.
To combat that dready brain dump, his golden rule is brilliantly simple. Always have your call sign written down on a physical piece of paper right in front of you. From his very first flight to his very last, Captain Steve says he always wrote his call sign down really big and stuck it on the yoke right next to him. That way, when you get called out and your brain dumps, you don't have to play a mental game of who am I right now. You just look down, read it, and maintain your professionalism on the radio.
And don't stop at the call sign. You should definitely be writing down your specific radio frequencies too: ground control, tower control, and departure control. Think about it. If an emergency kicks off, you absolutely do not want to be searching through digital menus or guessing who to talk to next. Having those numbers physically written right there next to you frees up so much vital mental bandwidth, letting you actually fly the plane and handle the problem at hand.
Here's another massive takeaway for you: situational awareness. If you just actively listen to the radios, you'd hear the planes ahead of you getting that 355-degree clearance, and you'd probably realize you should expect it too. The crew of American 2897 got that exact clearance right in front of them. If you hear everyone else ahead of you being assigned a right turn to 355 and you think your clearance says 314, you need to get curious. Active listening is honestly one of your best defenses against missing a crucial detail in your own briefing.
Ultimately, the Southwest pilot handles the aftermath perfectly by owning up to the mistake and just taking the scolding. When ATC gives him that mini lecture about how things work at LaGuardia, the pilot simply replies, "Sorry about that. It's a surrender." He completely owns it. And frankly, any pilot will take a verbal schooling any day of the week over a formal pilot deviation. In the end, pleasantries were exchanged and the flight continued safely on its way.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. We might not be flying jetliners out of New York, but we all have our own complex routines and our own high-stakes environments. When you think you know the exact path forward based on your manual, are you actively listening to the environment around you to catch the subtle changes? The next time you face a sudden shift in plans or an unexpected scolding, will your brain dump, or will you have your metaphorical call sign written down right in front of you?